Eastern Europe was in the Crusade of Varna against the Ottomans. The Ottomans won a decisive victory at Varna, killing the Polish king Władysław. Eastern Europe at this point was at the height of the complexities of feudalism, and so the death of this king, part of the Jagiellon dynasty, meant that Hungary and Poland split up, and are kingless at the start. Meanwhile, Bohemia is going through a similar crisis after the death of their ruler, Albert II. Oh god, what happened to him? Oh, of course. The throne was then contested. This is why Eastern Europe has so many interwebworms. One day after the battle is the 11th of November, 1444, the date where our historical source begins, Europa Universalis 4. It was at this point that 90% of the world discovered what diplomacy means, and suddenly there's absolute chaos as nations secure alliances and royal marriages with one another. Royal marriages, it seems, did not exist before 1444. Then how did this happen? Never mind. Władysław of Poland was loved globally. The Aztecs, Kilwa, Palpatine, Ming, everyone, to mourn his death, agreed to avoid all warfare for an entire month. The way wars are fought during this period are incredibly interesting, or, well, uninteresting. Two armies stand facing each other, a fair distance apart. The melee infantry and cavalry never move forwards. Like, look at this, they don't even touch each other. Eventually the infantry can get upgraded to longbowmen, which seems odd to have a row of longbowmen just undefended like that. Surely one basic cav army should tear them apart easily. It is safe to assume from these facts that battles at this time were not fought at all. After doing heavy research, I found more proof to this claim. Armies with more moral tend to win. If good morals equates to victory, then that would explain the lack of fighting. Battles are won by the skill of the generals, who roll dice and then order their men to suicide accordingly. That is where discipline comes in. The more disciplined the army, the more honourable they are to follow this rule set. Basically, warfare at this time is no different than a game of Risk. The world begins to turn, and not soon after, French forces siege Maine. Why did France not keep a tighter grasp on their forces? Historians will never know. They must have been lacking discipline, which means they will be dishonourable in battle during the suicide phase, which is why they lose the war against the naturally better English, but more on that later. However, the French army does eventually make up for it when they get Elon Musk on their side, who provides a morals boost to all troops. England, being as OP as we are, beat the French and put our own great heir onto their throne. England eventually gets the War of the Roses, which the House of York wins. The Yorkshire state gains autonomy and becomes a prosperous mighty republic, invincible to all threats. Sweden in this source appears overpowered. This is what we call source bias. The makers of this source were clearly Swedish, and everything we see around Sweden must be taken with a grain of salt. Speaking of Sweden, what idiot built this castle here? England goes on to easily conquer Ireland and subjugate Scotland. Why we did not manage this earlier? It's super easy, I have no idea. The Ottomans take Constantinople and become a very major threat. Main collapses. We've had the 7 warring states, the 3 kingdoms, the 8 princes, but now it is time for the infinite chaos. Castile goes to war against Granada and seizes their land, completing the Reconquista. Aragon suddenly chooses to let Naples go, much to the dismay of Castile, who eats Aragon just 2 days later. This is called the Iberian Wedding, and happened once a male and female sat on both thrones. The 80-year-old female of Aragon marries the 1-year-old king of Castile, and Castile gains it all. Logic. Colonization begins. Portugal is first to reach the New World, quickly followed by Castile. The Pope adopts a first-come, first-served policy when it comes to colonization. The intention behind this was to maintain the balance of power. However, it really just ends up giving a wild advantage to the Iberians in the early game. Meanwhile, in the Americas, the settled natives currently have a strategy that is like this.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
Last but not least, Burgundy is presented with the option to pick their own poison. They fall under a PU with Austria, just like Hungary, Bohemia, Milan, Poland, Lithuania, and eventually Spain. Stupid Habsburgs. Anyway, that is all for episode 1 of The History of the World according to Europa Universalis 4. In part 2, we will continue with this source, looking into the era of Reformation, how religion and the Holy Roman Empire works, and how the world continues to unfold. But anyway, your homework for this week: explain historically, using this source, how do Golden Ages work? Why are they limited to a perfect 50-year length? And how come each nation may only experience one? Best answers will be shown in part 2. Anyway, I have been MELKOR. 500 likes for part 2. Subscribe for more, share with anybody you think may be interested, and for now, until the next one, goodbye.